This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, some positive news today. Emerging markets rose after steep declines in the previous session. MSCI's index of emerging market shares rose 0.4% and looks set to break a three-session losing streak. It had lost about 2.7% on Monday, its steepest one-day loss in nearly 7 months. Of course, South Africa's JSE also firming up today just slightly. It was led higher by platinum miners and Naspers. That's, of course, after falling about 4% in the previous session, which, of course, was its worst day since the global financial crisis more than a decade ago. Now, overall, traders say they don't think today's rebound across markets will last, as, of course, the negative underlying sentiment still remains given the coronavirus situation. Now, also coming up on the show today, Egypt's former president, Hosni Mubarak, has died. Senegal commissions its first mega wind farm. And 7 coronavirus-related deaths are reported in Italy. Well, let's kick off today's show in Egypt. The country's ousted former president, Hosni Mubarak, has died. Now, the country's state television says the 91-year-old died weeks after undergoing surgery. Mubarak served as Egypt's 4th president and ruled for about 30 years. He was ousted by the military following mass protests against his rule in 2011. He was then jailed for nearly 6 years for conspiring to murder 239 demonstrators during the 18-day popular revolt. His removal paved the way for Egypt's first free election. Egypt's presidency and armed forces have mourned him as a hero for his role in the 1973 Arab-Israeli War. The former Air Force officer will be given a military funeral. Well, Adel El Maroui now joins us in Cairo with more on this. Adel, great to have you on the show. Now, of course, Adel, Mubarak ruled the country for 30 years. What has been the reception to the news of his death in the country?
A general sense of condolences and mourning across the country. The Egyptian presidential palace has released a statement of condolences to the former military general, as you've mentioned. He was the commander of the Air Force during the 1973 war, the 6 Days War, and a man that is considered to have worked so hard to bring the last piece of land of Egyptian territories from Israeli occupation, and for that, there's a sense of gratefulness from the people of Egypt to Mubarak on that specific role. Politically, of course, he was a man of controversy with general working on development in the country, but the last decade of Mubarak was the sparking point that has reached to the 2011 uprising. But generally, Egypt has announced a 3 days state of mourning across the country. There's a military funeral, as you've mentioned, that will be held in Mubarak's honor on Wednesday, and delegations, maybe leaders from the region, are expected to participate in that proceeding.
Now, as you mentioned, Adel, his time in office was quite complicated. His critics say he lost touch with most Egyptians, doing little to improve the life of Egypt's poor. What has a post-Mubarak economy looked like for Egyptians in terms of standards of living?
Post-Mubarak, since Mubarak actually came to power, he has been leading and continuing a policy of an open market in Egypt. He has been leading a major economic reform in terms of privatization of government property, and that has made the economy somewhat recover during specifically the last decade, where economically he was quite focused on reviving the country in that regard. Tourism-wise, Mubarak has led a massive restructuring. He's actually, his governments were the founder of they have actually turned Egypt into a touristic destination and have invested a lot in the infrastructure of tourism. Egypt has been still dreaming to reach the peak of 2010 in terms of tourism revenues and numbers, which is picking up in Egypt as well. In terms of GDP, Mubarak's last decade have seen the GDP cross the 5% mark, which is similar to what is happening now in Egypt with about 5.5%. In terms of foreign debt, Mubarak had Egypt in the range of the $30 billion, 35 to 37 in the late era of Mubarak. Now Egypt is a bit over $100 billion, but still international organizations, for example, say that Egypt is still in the safe zone. So in general, people in terms of poverty have been suffering. Complaints about poverty and making ends meet were common during Mubarak as they are today.
Well, Adel, President El-Sisi's administration seems to have approached Egypt quite differently from Mubarak. Of course, the government closely followed an IMF reform program, and as a result, we've seen the IMF as well as investors cheering the falling budget deficit and, of course, rising GDP in the country. So what has the government done different from Mubarak in getting investors to show interest in Egypt?
The government has been very bold in taking much needed economic measures, like, for example, liberating the Egyptian pounds and having a free forex exchange market, which Mubarak didn't dare to do. That has cost a lot. Mubarak's policy to maintain and defend the Egyptian pound against foreign currency, specifically the dollar, has made El-Sisi's task, when he finally took the decision, much harder to reach. Still, that has been done. President El-Sisi's governments have taken major steps to facilitate foreign investments to come to Egypt. They've established a one-stop shop, which has been a much-needed step and the source of complaints of foreign investors during Mubarak's era specifically. Also in terms of mega projects, urban expansion, President El-Sisi is by far leading a massive construction reform to Egypt. Many cities are being established and smart cities are being built. He's trying to expand the population to stretch it beyond this narrow 4% of the land on the banks of the Nile, where Egypt's 100 million population are mainly focused on. So the approach is much aggressive to make much needed reforms. However, the returns of that economic plan from the government is not felt yet and is not expected to be felt maybe on the short to medium range that the beginning of these reforms could be felt.
Now, of course, Mubarak's 30-year time in office ended with a bloody 18-day uprising. How did that uprising change the face of politics in Egypt and certainly the people's approach to government?
So 2011 was a major shock to Egyptians themselves, because there were frustrations politically, but no one dared to speak up. So when they've seen hundreds of thousands taking the street across first in Cairo and then bits spreading out to other cities, it was a huge change in terms of aspirations, political aspirations for the people. When Mubarak stepped down in what appeared to be a forceful stepping down from office, this was also a major breakthrough. Egypt has tremendously opened up political life in terms of political parties being established. Democracy somehow have been tried to be introduced, that has led to the elections of the Muslim Brotherhood. With the Muslim Brotherhood in power, Egypt did move once again, so there has been this free movement and requests, quite easy and common for Egyptians to take the streets and demand the president to step down. With President El-Sisi coming to power, the military establishment regained its strength and regained its major popularity that it has started to build up during the 2011 uprising, as the military was taking steps to be seen as the defender of the people's right. But in general, if we want to talk about the political situation right now, it is not much different than what has happened during Mubarak in terms of political diversity. There are several political parties. No major opposition can be seen, the same that was during Mubarak. But still, Egypt is going through under very different political challenges regionally and domestically in its war against terror, which makes many supporters stand by the military and the President El-Sisi in that pursuit, hoping that they will see much bigger changes in the political system in the coming years.
Well, as always, great to have your insight there, Adele. That's Adele El Maroui joining us in Cairo. Now, as you just heard there, former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak was ousted by the military in 2011. Mubarak spent 3 decades in office before a popular uprising swept Egypt. The country's longest-serving president was found guilty of complicity in the killing of protesters during the revolution. That conviction was overturned and he was freed in March 2017. While CGTN's Yasser Hakim looks back at the life of the former leader.
He's had an eventful life and a controversial career. Mohammed Hosni Mubarak, born on May 4, 1928, first rose to prominence in 1973. He was considered a war hero for playing a pivotal role in the 1973 war to liberate Sinai from Israeli occupation.
Vice President Hosni was the Air Force commander. They respect him a lot in Israel because the lesson was very painful.
Mubarak was appointed as vice president by Anwar al-Sadat in 1975. In 1981, he became president of Egypt at a critical time after the assassination of Sadat during a military parade.
I swear by the great God that I will sincerely abide by the Republican rule and respect the Constitution and the law, and to completely protect the well-being of the people and to protect the independence of our nation and its land.
Mubarak managed to steady the ship in Egypt and ruled the country for over 30 years. His reign was known to be one of peace and stability, but it was marred by growing corruption and abuse of power. And in 2011, the people revolted against Mubarak in what was known as the Arab Spring. After 12 days of demonstrations, Mubarak abdicated from power.
في هذه الظروف العصيبة التي تمر بها البلاد.
In these tough times that the country is going through, President Mohammed Hosni Mubarak decided to abdicate from the position of the President of the Republic and assign the higher military council to run the affairs of the country.
وكلف المجلس الأعلى للقوات المسلحة لإدارة شؤون البلاد والله الموفق والمستعان.
Mubarak, his 2 sons and political aides were taken to court for numerous charges. He spent 7 years in custody. In 2017, Mubarak was acquitted from most charges and released from jail. In spite of the critical end to his reign, Mubarak was commended for not fighting the popular uprising. He therefore avoided civil war and bloodshed. Mubarak also refused all offers to live abroad after the uprising and remained in his country to face the consequences.
Egypt will remain forever strong. Its well-being will remain my one and utmost aim for however long I live. From the day I was born, throughout my life and until I die, Egypt will remain my dear country. It will not leave me, and I will not leave it until I die.
Mubarak spent the remaining years of his life with his family, away from the limelight.
Well, let's shift focus now. In Ghana, more than 600 shops operated by foreigners remain shut 4 months after a local trade union shackled them. Now, Ghanaian traders say they took matters into their own hands after the government failed to enforce a law which prevents foreigners from engaging in retail businesses. Nigerian businesses have been particularly hard hit, and they're now warning if the situation isn't resolved soon, the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area may suffer. Well, CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
Emmanuel Sechi fixes faulty phones in Accra's business district. He buys his repair parts from Nigerian traders who sell close to his shop. But for the past 4 months, he's been losing business because the shops he usually buys from have been forcibly locked up.
They have closed the shop for too much, and I think they have to open the shop for us because there are a lot of things that we need to fix the phones. There are a lot of things that people are brought to us here that we have to fix it. But it's only Nigerians who have those things.
In November, the Ghana Union Traders Association locked up more than 600 shops operated by foreigners in Accra's central business districts. They claim the shops were operating in violation of a law which bans foreigners from engaging in retail operations. It's meant to protect Ghanaian jobs, but as the months drag on, the impact is spreading.
It's affecting both Nigerians and Ghanaians because sometimes some of the goods are cheaper than what other people are selling, and even those who've rented shops to Nigerians are being affected.
Some Nigerian traders say the lockup could impact the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is meant to boost intra-African trade. Instead, they warn that anti-foreigner sentiment could push investors away.
Many people have left Ghana in the last 2 years because when these people start carrying this gong going around that they don't want foreigners in the market, many people have left. That is not good for any economy. It's not good for West Africans.
But the Ghanaian traders say they only want to ensure retail business in the country is properly regulated.
We are just trying to enforce a law that's supposed to be enforced by the executive arm of this country. Local businesses are dying because foreigners are taking over the local markets.
The government set up a committee to verify the business permits of foreign retail firms in order to resolve the situation, but most have failed to submit their documents. It is unclear how many businesses are operating illegally in the country. As for Emmanuel Sechi, he just wants the situation to be resolved so he can get back to business as usual.
It's uncertain when these shops of Nigerians will be reopened for business, but the government says it is collaborating with both the Nigerian and Ghanaian traders to find a lasting solution to the situation as soon as possible. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
And now let's take a look at our corporate headlines today. The Competition Authority of Kenya has faulted supermarket chain Carrefour over its supplier deals that lead to unfair competition. Now, the regulator says Carrefour is forcing suppliers to pay a non-refundable fee to do business with the retailer, forcing them to provide extra rebates or discounts, as well as post their own staff at its outlets. The supermarket chain now faces a financial penalty of 10% of its gross sales if it does not review its policies within 60 days. And South African supermarket chain Shoprite has missed its half-year earnings forecast. This after being hit by currency devaluations in the rest of Africa and store closures in Nigeria in the wake of attacks on foreigners. Now, the retailer, with more than 2,800 outlets across Africa, said diluted headline earnings per share fell by 2.6% to 372.4 cents in the 26 weeks ending December 29th. That's from 382.4 cents a year earlier. An Egyptian lender, Bank Misr, has announced plans to borrow $250 million from international lenders in order to help them expand into Africa. Now, countries targeted in the expansion include Kenya, Djibouti, and Somalia. The bank will also use the funds to finance SMEs, even as they plan to sell a part of their stake in Bank du Caire. Now, the lender already has presence in the United Arab Emirates, France, Lebanon, Germany, China, Russia, South Korea, as well as Italy. And Zimbabwean billionaire Strive Masiyiwa's Econet Global is keen to acquire a telecoms license in Ethiopia. Ethiopia, of course, is opening up the industry to foreign investment for the first time. The Horn of Africa nation has plans to sell as much as 49% of the state-owned monopoly, Ethiopian Telecoms. It will also issue 2 new spectrum licenses. Now, Orange, MTN and Vodacom have already shown interest in the bid, aiming to tap more than 100 million people. Ethiopia has a relatively low level of data penetration and internet access. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still to come on the show. Senegal commissions its first mega wind farm. And Uganda's President Museveni asks countries bickering over Nile waters to seek new water sources.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head out now.
Beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidu. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back. Well, let's head to Senegal. The country has inaugurated the first large-scale wind farm in West Africa. The facility will supply nearly a sixth of the country's power when it reaches full capacity later this year. Now, with the wind farm, Senegal is also expected to draw about 30% of its energy from renewable sources. CGTN's Laura Walubengo with more.
This wind farm will provide the first ever utility-scale wind power in West Africa. The project is located about 100 kilometers from the capital, Dakar. It's part of efforts carried out by President Macky Sall as he seeks to meet the demand for energy without making the climate situation worse.
Here we have an energy mix that is on the move. And this energy mix will allow Senegal to be counted among the countries that respect the environment. To date, we have nearly 22% renewable energy and therefore clean energy. And at the end of this Taiba and Ndiaye wind power plant, we will be at 32%. From 2022, that is to say in 2 years precisely, Senegal will switch from gas to electricity. That is from gas to power. This should allow our country to be one of the few that will use almost 90% of clean energy.
The Taiba Ndiaye has been built by British renewable power company Lekela. The company also has wind farms in South Africa, Egypt, and an upcoming one in Ghana. Built on an area of 41 hectares, the wind farm has 16 turbines generating up to 50 megawatts. The first turbine was completed last year with a substation last October. Each turbine, standing 117 meters tall with blades of 61.7 meters, will produce around 3.45 megawatts. Experts believe This power plant would power Senegal for the next 20 years and prevent the emission of 300,000 tons of carbon dioxide annually.
This park allows us to better expand our generating fleet by diversifying sources. To date, we have fuel, hydroelectricity, solar, and we have just installed the wind turbine which completes the energy mix. We are going to dump all this production into the interconnected network which brings together Mauritania, Senegal and Mali. Last week we started the interconnection test with the Ivory Coast, which will allow us to develop greater robustness compared to our network and its capacity to absorb renewable energies.
Senegal aims to thrive as a key player in the oil and natural gas industry by making energy work for its economy. Its first solar plant came online 3 years ago and has since built several more. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Now, Uganda's president says that countries that share Africa's River Nile should stop bickering about its water, but instead look out for new water sources. That's the message from Yoweri Museveni when he addressed the 20th African Water Association Summit. CGTN's Michael Baleke was there and brings us this report.
It's the longest waterway in the world. How to share it is a source of controversy for countries along the Nile. Rapidly growing population and climate change are putting pressure on the natural resource. The Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni says one solution is for Africa to look to other underutilized sources like the Congo River for their water needs.
What we should do is to talk with the Congo and help Congo to deal with their problems, security and so on, so that we can see how Congo can help the other parts of Africa with this huge water, which is being taken by the ocean, and the ocean has no need for fresh water.
The Nile flows through 10 countries. The development of dams and irrigation systems have added fuel to centuries-long debates over who should control it. But it's not just the Nile countries in Africa struggling with the water crisis.
We have in the continent relatively limited access to basic water supply and sanitation services, with some countries in Africa having access to basic water services for less than 50% of the population, and Africa compares not so well with other regions in the world.
The World Bank says Africa has made significant progress in accessing water and sanitation, but the continent faces severe challenges. Water is a valuable natural resource, vital for life, development, and the environment. But the UN World Health Organization warns that by 2025, half of the world's population will be living in water-stressed areas. And the situation is more critical because of high levels of pollution in the available water resources.
The continent is undergoing rapid development. We're seeing industries developing. We're seeing things happen that we're not monitoring. And these are the things that are going to come back to haunt us if we don't address these in our monitoring systems.
Figures from the Africa Water Association show that more than 320 million people on the continent lack access to safe drinking water, and poor water quality is responsible for 70 to 80% of diseases in Africa. The hope is that the Water Conference in Kampala will present new breakthroughs and innovations to help improve access to clean and safe water. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Now, finding affordable accommodation in Nigeria's commercial capital of Lagos can be a very challenging task. Properties in the city are pricey and landlords typically require annual advances in rent payments. But one young Nigerian has come up with a creative solution to provide a cheaper option for accommodation in a city that desperately needs low-cost housing. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus reporting.
Most times what we do basically is we acquire a dilapidated structure, then we'll bring it down and develop a new one.
He's one of the new faces in the real estate scene in Lagos, helping to address the challenge of affordable accommodation in a city where finding one is quite tough.
This place, it goes for 4 million naira and you own for 20 years.
Ibrahim Adetuga calls his real estate startup the 1 million landlord, and that's because of the strategy he's devised to help people get decent and affordable accommodation without having to break the bank.
This place, we list it at the rate of 3 million naira for 17 years.
1 million landlord essentially provides affordable apartment for a long lease. With just 1 million naira, which is around $2,750, one could become a homeowner for about 15 years or more.
We develop a strategy that, okay, let's partner with real estate developers. And these developers will just tell them that, okay, you know what, you need funds, right? Yes. Who will bring in investors? Who will bring in the funds and ensure that this project is completed even earlier than when you expected it or earlier than when you projected it. So, and they bought our idea and partnered with us.
Through his startup's partnership with real estate developers, Adetuga collects ₦1 million each from a number of clients seeking homes to rent. He then uses the funds to acquire an old house on a very long lease. He rebuilds or renovates the house, and when he's done, those who have contributed money then move in and live in the house for as long as the lease lasts.
And one amazing part of this scheme is that as the landlord of this apartment, you can always rent it out too, to earn income.
Many in the city are now signing up with his firm. This couple is one of the beneficiaries. After struggling to find the kind of accommodation they could afford, they ran into Adetuga and his startup and wasted no time in signing up.
It's a very good one for any, because by the time you check the rent you could have paid in that 15 years, you realize that the money you use in investing in this is small compared to how much you would have paid if you were paying rent for 15 years.
The real estate startup, which is just over a year now, has got more than 50 clients in Nigeria and the diaspora. Adetuga says he's on a mission to provide solutions to the increasing housing challenge in Lagos and to make sure housing is cheap and affordable, even in highbrow areas of the city. And beyond providing affordable housing, by acquiring old buildings and either rebuilding or renovating them, the 1 million landlord startup is also indirectly helping to give the city a facelift with modern structures. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now in Kenya, it's ride-hailing but farm style. Deere and Company is teaming up with the Uber of tractors in Africa and betting on a future where farmers summon machines with the touch of a button. Take a look.
The world's leading farm equipment maker is outfitting its tractors with startup Hello Tractors technology, which allows farmers to hail the machines via an app, monitors the vehicle's movements, and transmits usage information such as fuel levels. The aim is to help the US company boost sales of its famous green and yellow John Deere tractors, a hard task in a continent with the world's highest poverty rate and the least mechanized agricultural sector.
We do like to see that every farmer has access to mechanization, and that for us was just a natural fit. Hello Tractor came in with an affordable telematic solution that allows us to connect people.
Deere is currently testing the technology, which is a small box fitted beneath dashboards on around 400 tractors in Ghana and Kenya. It plans to roll out the devices across Africa in the second half of this year, offering it to all contractors who buy its equipment on the continent.
This device has an inbuilt GPS system that allows him to see where his tractor is at any given time, and also allows him to see whether the tractor is active or it's moving or whether it's stopped, and the amount of work it has done at the end of the day for every job that it does.
Around 80% of African cropland is still cultivated by hand. One of the biggest barriers of mechanization is finance. Though agriculture accounts for around a quarter of Africa's economic output and some 70% of jobs, banks often view farmers as high risk because of the lack of credit histories.
The global average is 200 tractors per 100 square kilometers of arable farmland. Africa averages around 8 tractors per 100 square kilometers. Nigeria alone needs 750,000 tractors to be on the global average. So where the world is right now in terms of tractor sales, there's a huge opportunity for Hello Tractor to support that customer base.
Deere thinks it can help on the financing front by pulling data from the Hello Tractor platform that showed in precise detail how farmers were using its equipment. In central Kenya, Pascal Kaumbudho is testing the app on a tractor that belongs to Agrimec Africa.
What we've done before is depended on the operators to record where they are and what they are doing. And you get very rough, information that way. With the Hello Tractor app, we are able to monitor how much area. And not only that, we are able to prove to others that we have actually been working. It's one thing to walk to a bank and say, hey, I work very hard. It's another thing to be able to show it.
Agrimec, which is paid by farmers to work their land, hopes the new tech will help optimize its Deere tractors and connect them to new customers, allowing it to expand. Kaumbudho, whose company manages a dozen tractors, envisions a future in which Agrimec runs a 1,000-strong fleet.
Right now we are reaching about 1,500 farmers. Within the next 2-3 years, I would like to reach 20,000. And it's not impossible. Once we have been let down by lack of capacity.
Deere's annual revenue of about $40 billion is dominated by the Americas and Europe. It doesn't break out numbers for Africa, but combined revenue from Africa, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and the Middle East was $3.9 billion last year. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
You are watching Global Business Africa. Let's head into a quick break, but coming up. Seven coronavirus-related deaths are reported in Italy. And the US and India agree to start talks on a comprehensive trade deal.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
And here's a quick recap of today's top headlines. Egypt's ousted former president, Hosni Mubarak, has died. The country's state television says the 91-year-old died weeks after undergoing surgery. Mubarak served as Egypt's fourth president. He ruled for about 30 years. He was ousted by the military following mass protests against his rule in 2011. And Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has confirmed the death of 2 Turkish troops in Libya. Now, Turkey has been providing military support to the Tripoli-based Government of National Accord, which has been trying to fend off an offensive by Khalifa Haftar's forces to the east. Last year, the two sides signed a military cooperation deal. Turkey has since sent troops there. And a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip is in place after 2 days of exchange of fire with Israel. The truce went into effect Monday. Israel began the hostilities on Sunday when it shot dead a member of the Islamic Jihad armed faction in Gaza. The Palestinian group responded by firing rockets and mortar rounds into southern Israel, causing no injuries. Now, the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza says 15 Palestinians were wounded, 2 of them quite seriously. And that is a recap of today's top headlines. And now for the latest on the coronavirus outbreak in China. As of 7:30 p.m. Beijing time, the country has confirmed nearly 78,000 cases. More than 28,000 people have recovered and around 2,800 are quarantined as suspected cases. Now, while China keeps adding new cases, we can see that the growth rate has slowed for 10 days. On Monday, Hubei province, where the outbreak began in the capital, Wuhan, reported over 550 new cases. The majority of the new cases in China are from Hubei province. Outside Hubei, at least 23 provinces and regions reported no new cases. Now, Italy has confirmed more than 280 cases and 7 deaths. A team of experts from the WHO and the European Centre for Diseases Control and Prevention are there to support containment efforts. Our correspondent Natalie Carney told us earlier how they're assessing the current situation.
The team arrived on Monday evening and they are expected to help their Italian authorities or their Italian counterparts in the areas of clinical management, infection protection and control, as well as surveillance and risk communication. They do say at this particular current time with these cases, the focus really is on limiting further human-to-human transmission. The rapid increase here in Italy is very much a concern, not only to Italy, but to the World Health Organization and, as you've just heard, to the European Union as a whole. And the WHO say they are taking this increase here in Italy very seriously. Based on the current data, however, they also note that most of the current cases that have been identified here in Italy, 4 out of 5 of them, the majority of them, are showing mild to no symptoms, which could pose even further challenges down the road in trying to contain and confine the spread of this virus. Italian authorities, of course, have also implemented their own prevention measures over the weekend. The Italian Prime Minister announced emergency protections in 11 communities around the north of the country, which are effectively now under lockdown, affecting about 50,000 inhabitants.
Now, staying with the novel virus, with China looking to get people back working and the economy moving again, authorities today announced special measures for areas of varying risk.
It means that provinces and localities, including Hubei and Beijing, will be distinguished into high-risk areas, medium-risk areas, and low-risk areas with county level as the basic unit. For low-risk areas, there will be a focus on preventing infected people from entering. But within, work and production will return to normal, and travel restrictions will be removed. For medium-risk areas, enterprises will be instructed how to conduct appropriate control measures. Virus control will be as important as the resumption of work. And for high-risk areas, there should be strict containment measures. The orderly resumption of work will only be allowed after the virus is controlled.
Meanwhile, senior Tunisian economists and scholars say that China is able to contain COVID-19's fallout and achieve its economic goals for 2020. The same analysis and conclusions were made by the Chinese ambassador to Tunisia. CGTN's Adnan Shaoshi reporting.
Financial analysts assert that China has enough expertise in managing and anticipating any crisis.
China is Tunisia's economic partner. We import goods, cars and technology. It's a great nation that will overcome current difficulties. The production will resume stronger, better and faster with the usual guarantee of quality.
Tunisian businessmen and investors say they will always believe in China's economic miracle despite current difficulties.
We have strong economic ties with China. I personally import 70% of machines from China, where some factories have stopped production while Tunisian businesses are waiting for the normal resumption of activity.
The Chinese ambassador to Tunisia stressed that China is able to contain the COVID-19 fallouts and achieve its economic goals for 2020.
China follows the right strategies and the necessary budgetary and financial assets to impulse economic development, as well as a strong leadership to concentrate China's resources to face any difficulties or epidemics.
Experts assert that Chinese economy will maintain its growth rate and help stabilize global growth after the end of the COVID-19 crisis.
Tunisian economists, health professionals and experts at the National Committee on New and Emerging Diseases have voiced confidence in the Chinese government's ability to overcome the situation and to find a cure for COVID-19. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, let's move on now. The leaders of the United States and India have agreed to begin talks on a trade deal. The decision was reached after Donald Trump met Narendra Modi in New Delhi. Now, India and the U.S. have also signed major defense agreements. Trump was given an official welcome at India's presidential palace on Tuesday. He met President Ram Nath Kovind. The U.S. president also paid his respects to India's independence movement leader Mahatma Gandhi, laying a floral wreath at his memorial site. Now, this is Trump's first state visit to India. He attended a massive rally at the world's largest cricket stadium in Gujarat on Monday.
The increasing defense and security cooperation between India and the United States is a very important aspect of our strategic partnership. Cooperation in ultra-modern defense equipment and platforms will enhance India's defense capabilities.
Earlier today, we expanded our defense cooperation with agreements for India to purchase more than $3 billion of advanced American military equipment, including Apache and MH-60 Romeo helicopters, the finest in the world. These deals will enhance our joint defense capabilities as our militaries continue to train and operate side by side.
And now to a warning from the Cuban government. The country is experiencing a shortage of cooking gas, the result of U.S. sanctions. Well, CGTN's Luis Chirino has more for us from Havana.
Following a warning from the Cuban government about a shortage of liquid petroleum gas used for cooking, here many citizens rushed to the gas cylinder dispatch centers.
For several days in a row, there were long lines at the gas dispatch center. People were worried that they might not get any more gas, so the demand went far beyond the availability.
The official announcement said U.S. sanctions are hampering Cuban fuel imports and have led to the current gas shortage.
In late 2019, the U.S. sanctioned the Cuban energy company Panamericana, which guaranteed the country's gas imports. But as a result of the U.S. sanctions, our gas providers in this part of the world cut deliveries to Cuba.
To cushion the import gap, authorities imposed restrictions on gas deliveries by changing delivery times to customers. According to Cuban authorities, the gas shortage has affected 1.7 million households who now have to wait for longer periods of time to get their cooking gas. Many homes in Cuba are not connected by fuel lines, so residents depend on bottled gas. Spreading out the deliveries relieved the initial uncertainty, but for many households, it's hard to make ends meet.
After they extended the gas delivery period to nearly 2 times the previous one, we were affected, and some have resorted to using electric cooking appliances.
Senior citizen Josefa Sanchez says the shortage affects her family's everyday life.
There are 4 in my family, including my 2-year-old granddaughter, but the available gas is no longer enough to meet our cooking needs. I used to receive a cylinder every 19 days. Now it's about once a month.
Cuban energy authorities are working on ways to ease the crunch.
We have been forced to look for new providers in other parts of the world at higher costs, but we need to stabilize deliveries and return to normality.
While waiting for a stable solution to the fuel shortage, Cubans realize they have no alternative but to adapt and live with the limited local gas reserves. Luis Chirino, CGTN, Havana.
Now, the United Arab Emirates has been trying to cash in on the gaming market in the Gulf as the sector eyes new areas for growth. Well, the Girl Gamer eSports Festival is the latest such venture to arrive in Dubai. And CGTN's Jacob Greaves was there and brings us this report.
Gaming might not be the first thing that springs to mind when you think of Dubai, but it's the backdrop for a tournament putting female esports players centre stage, with the UAE's first female team competing.
I quit my job about 7 months ago to continue gaming as my career. I started off with streaming, and then this is a bit more on the professional level, so you can't kind of handle both at the same time. So I took it fully pro from there.
This is their first competition. In fact, they've only been training for 2 months. Not long to hone their skills, but the players hope this is only the beginning.
As an Emirati person, I would love to be known worldwide, like a girl gamer, an Emirati representing her country and is known worldwide. I think this is the start of everything that is going to happen in the next few years, that people started actually realizing that there are gamer girls out there in the industry. It's not just males and males.
This event hopes to encourage more women to consider careers in the world of esports, but it's also looking to establish a footprint in a growth area for gaming.
If you were looking at the major markets right now, it's still the US and probably China very strong, but there are emerging markets, and I would say that these emerging markets are the Middle East region, the Southeast Asia, and India as well. So we see professional teams starting to move in, starting to want to engage into these markets, and for us, we want to start an event here while we can still become pioneers in the region.
The GCC has already seen rapid gaming growth in recent years, according to analysis by Strategy and a consultancy firm associated with PwC. The video gaming market in this region will be valued at $821 million by 2021.
The kills come in. Why?
That's an average annual growth of 4.3% since 2017. Both the UAE and Saudi Arabia have recently held high-profile gaming events as they jostle to become regional hubs. A crown currently held by Saudi Arabia with a projected market value of over $295 million for 2021. Those operating in the kingdom point to a burgeoning gaming ecosystem.
It started from communities, different games. Games brought us together. Businesses have been formed around the esports ecosystem itself. We have players, we have coaches, we have teams, we have content creators.
Globally, the gaming industry is set to be worth $138 billion this year. The question going forward is what more can be done to empower women to take a slice of the pie. Jacob Greaves, CGTN in Dubai.
And shifting focus now, here's a quick look at commodity prices today. Now, we saw oil prices steadying above $56 per barrel today. That's after 2 days of declines, and that's as OPEC output cuts and Libyan supply losses balanced out those concerns about the spread of the coronavirus and, of course, its impact on oil demand. Now, traders say risk appetite appears to be growing again on the markets, but, of course, the coronavirus and the resulting risks to demand cannot be expected to disappear from the news anytime soon. Meanwhile, gold prices easing today as investors book profits from a jump to a 7-year high in the previous session, and of course as equities regain some footing today. But a spike in coronavirus cases outside China continues to cap gold's losses. Well, let's take a short break now. Still to come. Innovative disposable ice buckets changed the career path of a South African waiter. Now, an innovative idea has taken a gutsy young South African man from being a waiter to a businessman. Fino Sambayang's innovative disposable ice bucket has made it onto the shelves of one of Africa's biggest retailers. It has also earned him a spot on EY's top 100 African innovators list. CGTN's Julie Shire has his story.
Fino Sambayang's big break came when he landed a deal to supply retail giant ShopRite with his disposable ice bucket. By then, he had convinced his friends to invest in his business and borrowed money to make the 18-hour bus journey from Rustenburg to Cape Town for the meeting that changed his life.
I was very excited, even though I knew that a lot of work is, now hard work begins. I mean, I think being listed is only just a small part of it. Once you start to supply, that's when a lot of work begins. But yeah, I was excited and I really felt blessed.
Sambayang had to go to China to manufacture his recyclable D-coolers. They're lighter and cheaper than the bulkier cooler boxes and can be easily transported.
It is specifically tailor-made for ice and beverages, because obviously the material has to behave like an ice bucket. It has to be strong enough to hold ice and beverage inside, and of course it's not supposed to leak.
The D-coolers have become popular among consumers. 100,000 units have been sold since hitting the shelves in November 2018. Sambayang's next goal is to have them made in South Africa.
So if you can just start by bringing the manufacturing to home, create employment and just keep on building on the company, build the brand, build the product. That's what we are focused on at this moment.
This young entrepreneur says others should not be deterred by the lack of jobs in South Africa, but they should see it as an opportunity to create their own innovative businesses. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, the 2020 New York Toy Fair comes to an end on Tuesday in Manhattan. More than 1,000 global exhibitors have showcased some 150,000 toys, games, and other products. Let's check out the latest trends.
Boy, so clever. You want to sit, sweetie? Oh, good boy.
Balloon Dog by Moose Toys, Lego Dots, and in real-life toys, such as toys inspired by YouTube channel Ryan's World, are popular among visitors of this year's event.
One of the hottest trends we're talking about this year is generations of play. So talking about all those retro and nostalgic brands that are back, like the Care Bears, you see Pokemon, Ninja Turtles, but also a lot of games and other toys that families can play with together. So bringing generations around the table together. Another trend we're talking about is IRL, and that's in real life. So kids have so many digital influences. There's so many different ways to view content, Disney Plus, Netflix. So we're seeing a lot of those properties, either from video games or from different shows that they're viewing, being brought down to fun toys they can play with. Even YouTube influencers are getting their own toy lines.
Lego yet again bet on building with their new concept called Dots.
We are introducing Lego Dots. We're very excited to showcase it in the Americas for the first time. It's a brand new concept from the Lego group, and it's building, but it's building in a different way and more of an arts and crafts experience. So we have some tile building here. These will be out in a few weeks, come March 1st, and it's a really great way that kids can express their creativity and then kind of wear it or display it in their room. So kind of a different way to play with Lego.
It's the largest toy show in the Western Hemisphere, with nearly 1,000 global companies taking part. The Toy Association says the toy industry generates about $97 billion annually in the U.S. alone. Shen Li, CGTN.
Well, before we go, let's check in on Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand failed to recover from losses, but it was steady today as investors eyed the risk posed by the national budget speech tomorrow. Now, the currency is down more than 4% over the past month. It faces a key test on Wednesday as markets look to that budget speech. Meanwhile, Kenya's shilling was stable and traders said it was likely to stay in a tight range due to limited demand for dollars by importers. And that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.